Okay, so let's talk a little bit about materials and what you're going to need to create your own light box. The first thing that you need is a shadow box. And the number one question that I've been asked is, well, how deep does the shadow box have to be? When it comes to the deer design, which we're going to do today, once you add the spacers and all 9 layers, it's 2 inches thick, and that's not including the lights. So my 2 IKEA light boxes, once they're put together, it gives me a working depth of 3 inches, which is just perfect. Where do you find your shadow boxes? It really depends on whereabouts you're from. I know that my fellow crafters that live in the States can easily find them at places like Walmart, Hobby Lobby, even online. But I'm from Montreal, Canada, and my first logical choice was to go to Michael's. They opened up a few stores. So I went there, and I almost died when for a 10 by 10 4-inch deep shadow box, it's $39.99. So my 2 boxes from IKEA, once they're put together, it gives me a working depth of 3 inches, and that was perfect for the deer template. Next, let's talk about cardstock. So my deer light box was machine cut. I used the Cricut Air 2. And I struggled a little bit to find a good cardstock that cut very, very well. So what I finally ended up using was this white smooth cardstock. It's 12 by 12 sheets, and it's 78-pound cardstock, which is 210 GSM. I tried things like textured cardstock and little scraps that I had lying around, and they didn't really cut well. So for me, this is what worked. It's really trial and error depending on how you're cutting them, what machine you're cutting them with. The only thing to remember when you are choosing a cardstock is that you want something that's going to be thick enough that it kind of stands up on its own, like the deer. They need to stand and not flop over. But you also want it thin enough that it still lets the light through. And I couldn't figure out at first why everybody was just using white cardstock. The reason being is because white is what allows most of the light through, and it also reflects the light. So when you see that it's on, if you look up in the mountains and stuff like that, you can kind of see the light shining up. I don't know if you would get that with colored cardstock. I haven't tried yet. I really, really like the white. Okay, next let's talk about the spacers. So in order to allow the light to come through the box, in between each layer, you need to add a space. So it kind of looks like that when it's lying in the box. You can see that there's spacers. This is where I changed my method a lot between the first box and the second box. So I went online, did the research, and a lot of people use foam board. So basically what you do is you cut strips of foam board to the length of your frame, and then you glue the strips to the back of the design. My first box had 6 layers, so I had to cut 24 strips, and I found it took a lot of time. And as you can kind of see here, towards the end, my lines were no longer straight. They started to become different thicknesses, and by the end, my arm was tired. So normally I like working with the foam board, but when you're making all these strips, it tends to get a little tedious. So for my second box, what I decided to do was I went and I ordered weather stripping. So basically it's foam that's double-sided sticky. And I was able to get a whole bag of weather sealer. This whole bag, which contains 60 feet, only cost me $20, and I was able to get that off Amazon.ca. It just made it applying it so much easier. So basically, it's self-adhesive on one side, so I would just stick that to the frame, cut it off. I wouldn't even peel the back off of it because you don't need the 2 layers to stick to each other. You just need to be able to lay it on top. And that saved me so much time, and I still have all my fingers. And last but not least, and probably the most frustrating part of the whole light box experience for me, the lights. So what I use is a 6.6 foot LED light strip. It's a 5 volt. It comes with the power adapter, and it also comes with a remote. Now these are RGB lights, which means they go red, green, and blue, and 16 colors in between, and also white. On my shadow box, I know that in some of the pictures that it looks multicolored, but it's not. It's all one colored light, and what changes the color is actually the blue vellum in the water. That's how in some of the pictures it looks like it's 2 different colors, but it's really not. It's all one light. The first shadow box that I did, I tried to follow the diagrams that I've seen in all the templates that you purchase or online, some of the videos. And basically what they do is they take the strip and they cut it. And then once it's cut, you have to attach it with these little connector pieces, which are usually quite long. So people recommended tying them into a knot. And then you have to slide this end into the connector, and then you have to connect each piece, and then people were laying them across the back of the board and then connecting them. And so I tried to do that for my first light box, and I got so frustrated with it because every time I thought that I was done and I would put the template all together, when I would lift it up, some of these connectors would come loose, so only 2 out of 3 of the light strips was working. So I got really frustrated with it and almost scrapped the whole thing. So what I did for my first box then is I decided that I wasn't even going to cut the lights. So basically what I did is I took the little insert frame that comes with the shadow boxes and the back. So what I did is make sure that you cut a hole big enough in the back of your box that's going to allow the power cord to go through. And I glued that to the back of the frame. So it works out perfectly. It's now somewhere to house the lights. Some people online were telling me, well, just run the lights on the inside of the frame. The only problem is the first shadow box that I did, I didn't have enough room left. So for the deer shadow box, it worked out perfectly. Because I used the 2 frames, I did the same method. I glued the little insert to the back, and I started to run my lights up the inside of the board. So I ran my lights around twice, and then I thought I was going to cut the extra, but then I decided that, well, why not just take the extra and run it up along the top of the box and then down the other side. The more light that's in the box, the brighter it's going to be. You can see that I did have to use tape, because once you get the box all assembled, you may find that there's certain areas that you want lit up a little more. So you go in and you simply just move the excess light to where you want it. Just be careful, because if it's in a very open area, you will see the little LED lights. So basically what I did the first time around that I put it all together, I had the point up at the top, but where the moon comes through, it's the only, it's just a sheet of vellum that separates the moon from the light, and I found that it was too spotty. So all I did was I basically turned it around. So now the water covers the bottom part of the LEDs, which you don't see, and then the 2 tops are in the sky, which lights it up very nice. Like I said, it's a lot of trial and error. That's why I suggest leaving the little bit of extra until the end. Once you get it all together, you can see where you would like to move the lights. By that time, if you move them a few times, they don't stick anymore. So I just used a couple of strips of duct tape, and you don't even see it through the box.